Okay, I think, excuse me, this is Bill Shell. I'm going to be the presenter for the identity theft presentation here on behalf of SCORE, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. Um, Wanted to just welcome all of you all. I see here I've got 4 attendees at this point: Frank, Bill, Treasure Coast SCORE Chapter 308, and Richard Arnold. And it's now 5:30, so I'll go ahead and get started. The slide you see now is a generic overview slide of part of the people that support us. The Small Business Development Center is, of course, a federally funded and supported organization. We have the Florida chapter helping us out here. SCORE helps small businesses mostly on a volunteer basis. We try to do anything for the life of your business, as SCORE said. And we're supported to some extent by SBDC. Locally, Martin County Library System and St. Lucie County support us, and we want to give them credit here also. I'm going to be using a number of different things here within the presentation envelope, so to speak, and I wanted to go through those briefly with you. At some point on your screen, you'll find a place to ask a button under the chat. I've enabled all the chat to be so that you all can use that. If you want to ask me a question, go ahead and enable the chat and write the question there. I may not answer it immediately as you post it, but I should be able to answer it before we end. I don't expect this to take longer than about 20 or 25 minutes. There are a number of other buttons up there. The polling button, I'll ask you some polling questions, but we haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm new at this. SCORE's new at this. This is our first time, so bear with us. There are a number of other buttons, the attendee list, other buttons. There's an offer button. We're not going to offer you any products for free when we get done here. But the most important are probably the chat button, the polling button, and the question and answer button. I will assume you'll ask questions during the presentation, but if you want to ask them when we get done, that's fine too. So knowing that and having all said all that, we'll go right into the presentation. This is the first slide, which is duplicated up here. And this is the first one that has any real meat in it. Everybody's heard about identity theft, but most people don't think of it or don't continue to think about it when they think about business. Most of the people that SCORE helps are small business people. Either they have a small business now or they're going to have one. And so identity theft from the business viewpoint is something we need to think about. This slide here indicates the first item is something you've thought about. The second and third items are something you may not have thought about, but it's a very new thing in the security world and in the identity theft world is what we call ransomware. Ransomware is when somebody gets into your network or gets into your computer system, encrypts all your files, many of which may be files that they would make public if you let them. And then they say to you, oh, for this amount of money, we'll give you the encryption key and you unlock your files. That whole issue is worth a whole nother presentation if we want. But the fact is that it does happen, so you need to be aware of that. Preventing identity theft is about trusting in people or people who trust you to protect their data that you are storing on your computer systems. Mostly, the last 3 parts of the slide talk about employees, customers, and vendors. And you have to think about the information that you might have that relates to either your employees, your customers, or your vendors, or maybe your business by itself. The identity theft trust thing also extends to who are you going to trust when you have a problem. Not if, but when. Some people might be tomorrow, some people might be 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, but it probably will happen to you. The key here is you have to put your trust in 2 individuals. One of them is a lawyer, one of them is a computer person. Additionally, other people have put their trust in you, your vendors, your customers, and your employees. But here's the people that you have to trust if and when you have a problem. When something fails, one of those people who you trusted will have not upheld their trust, your trust in them. It's often thought that people may be able to buy a piece of software or buy a piece of technology, a computer or a black box or something, and that helps them prevent identity theft. In most cases, that is absolutely not true. Unfortunately for you, for the small business person, identity theft is more about lost trust or failed trust than it is about failed technology. Obviously, you can buy technology and put it in place, but do you have the people that are capable of supporting that technology and knowing what that technology will tell them? That's a key problem in many people trying to buy their way out of the identity theft world, and it doesn't happen. A number of different places where you can do something right, but someone can still create an identity theft problem for you. If you do everything right, if your vendors do everything right, if your employees and your customers do everything right, you're saved in essence for those classes of people that you've done something right for. But nothing prevents someone you don't know, someone who's never walked in the door of your business, someone who might be on the other side of the world, from walking into your network and using your network to create the illusion that you have failed in someone's trust of you. So don't be lured into the belief that just because you do everything right, you can't get hit with this problem, because it's not true. The ideal place and time for your documented evidence, especially if you get hit by someone that you don't know, is you have to have documented evidence that you've done things right. What's that documented evidence? That documented evidence is mostly policies. And those can ensure, from a legal viewpoint, that you've done all you can to prevent someone from using your system or systems to create an identity theft problem. You can insure against fire, hurricane, loss of hard assets. Well, most of what you insure is your building, your vehicles, your inventory, your manufacturing plant. Those are all what we call hard assets. They're not information assets. They're hard assets. In a hard asset, you can insure against it, you can put a lock on it. Unfortunately, it's very hard to insure your data. Many insurance companies will claim they do, but if you read the fine print, the reality is that neither you nor them can do anything once the data is gone. And it's hard to prove that you had data if someone steals it. So think about the difference in your business. Think about carefully the difference in your business between a hard asset, something you put a lock on, and information. Here's the other thing to think about when you think about identity theft. Identity theft means something to you. It means that someone, quote, stole something. But does it mean the same thing to those people who have entrusted their data for your storage? Your customers, your vendors, your employees. When you store their data, data belongs to them, but it is on your storage. Do you trust them to give you the correct data? Do they trust you to store it? Remember, data is all about trust. When something happens, you set up your small business. You will undoubtedly have access to information that you may or may not want to have access to. Orders, employee medical records, social security numbers, vendors' tax numbers, etc., etc., etc. My recommendation is to negotiate with these people. What do you not want and do not need to run your business adequately? Many times you try to negotiate out not having this data. Someone will say, well, my software puts that data in there. I'll just give it to you anyway. Try to get out of that. It's hard. Some people will agree to that. Some people won't. But remember, all the data that's on your system belongs to someone. Who is the owner of that data? In what way would the owner like to use to protect that data? What is logical and reasonable to them? What is logical and reasonable to someone else? But remember that key point. The data that you have belongs to someone else, not to you. We talked briefly about locks and keys. How do you protect something with locks and keys? You know, for instance, when you close your office door and lock the door at night when you leave, that's protection of a hard asset. But what if you're not there when the door is closed and locked? Do you trust that person? Do you have a process or a procedure or a policy for when the last employee walks out of your house at night, or not your house, but your office, or out of your manufacturing plant, or out of your warehouse? What does that person do? And do you know and can you guarantee that that person has put the same care into leaving the office or leaving the manufacturing plant that you would put into it? Are you sure that they do what you do? Protection. How do you protect data? In paper form, you lock the file cabinet. In electric form, you lock the file, the computer, the office door, also the network. Think about this. When you're not there, is the network still alive? Are the computers still alive? Could someone walk through your network and access data while you're not in the office? It's usually a good idea to turn off your router, to turn off your computers when you leave at the end of the day. Again, do you have a policy that proves those people that walk out the door, that are the last employees to leave, will they do what you did to protect the information that you have? Excuse me. But you may say, oh, I buy my network from someone else, AT&T or Comcast or Verizon or whoever. That network that you buy from them is not in your office. There's a network in your office called a LAN, a local area network. And yes, you buy your connectivity from someone else, from AT&T or Comcast. How do you guarantee that Comcast or AT&T is going to show the same respect for your network and the information you have that you do? Maybe they do, maybe they do not. But have you ever thought about it? Probably not. Protect from and to. You protect your physical office from certain people by locking the door and the windows and even the sewers. You protect your network operation. How? Think about that a minute. Think about where the data is that's going to create an identity theft for you. That information is on your network. How do you protect your network when you walk out the door at night? There are a number of different ways to do that. This slide is all about basic protection of electronic information. There are other things that you can do. This is, believe it or not, this is the topic. Protection of electronic information is a topic for an entirely separate talk. We're talking tonight mostly about identity theft, but most identity theft can be prevented by basic protection of electronic information. So how do you protect the electronic information? These are just some ways to do it. There are other ways. There may be ways that are easier or harder, more expensive or less expensive, easier to trust someone to do or not trust someone to do. By and large, this here begins your tread down a path to protect your electronic information. Eventually, you'll get zapped, and it's not a pretty day. It won't be a pretty day for anyone. But your first reaction or reaction should be a knee-jerk reaction. You say to yourself, what's the correct knee-jerk? The correct knee-jerk is your lawyer. The second knee-jerk is probably a computer person. The next slide gives you some things to think about. First is legal. Second is business continuance. But remember, there are other things almost more important than business continuance, and they are the employees, the vendors, or the customers whose data has been stolen. This slide here tells you that you probably owe some explanation to your staff, customers, or vendors, whoever was violated. But on top of that, you have to have a trusted lawyer, a trusted computer admin person to help you get through this. Do you have a policy? No, you probably don't. But the policy will help you from a legal viewpoint if you do have it and if you've had people sign it. There are a number of policies that you need. There's a couple of examples that I'm going to use here. Appropriate use is just one of them because it's usually the biggest. We'll go back up here. In the first hour or the first day after you get lost, or after someone has proven that your company has been the source of an identity theft violation. Again, legal business continuance. You don't see the computer person up here because that's because you should already have called him or her. Get down here, you have an appropriate use policy. Appropriate use is only one of a number of policies that the company needs, in essence, to prove to a legal environment that you have done what you ought to be doing as a business owner. I'm not going to go through all of this individual line by line. You can read it. But the key here of these things is this. At the very bottom of this slide, it says, do you know that your employee for whom you're paying 8 hours every day, roughly, is that person doing what you're paying them to do? Or are they looking at pornography or sports all day long? Do you know? Do you trust your employee? Do you have router logs? It's the middle item on this slide. Do you have router logs that prove that your employees are spending their paid for 8 hours doing work for your company, or are they doing something else? Do you know how to monitor your router logs? Do you have a computer person that can do this for you? Maybe, maybe not. The bottom line is you need someone to help you here. Again, an opportunity for you to trust someone. Bottom line, identity theft is about trusting people and about information. Information affects people's lives and reputations, businesses, as well as people, individuals. And information affects business reputations. Information, and this is a key that most people don't think about. Information, you can't take it back. Once somebody's let it off your network, it's gone. You can't go back out and tell the police, oh, recover my blue 1997 Chevy truck. Oh, and they can do that. It may not be the same, although it may be, but you can't do that with information. Information is long-term. It stays out there forever. There are files floating around the internet that I created in 1992. Think about that. That's a long, long time ago. You let it go, it's gone. Back to what do you do after it's gone? Well, the physical assets are things. You can put locks on them. Electronic assets, information, data, databases. Your disgruntled employee, the guy that you just lost it with, can put everything that is of value to you on a USB disk, and he can walk out the door with it. You cannot easily serialize information assets, data assets. You can protect them, but you cannot get them back once they're gone, like you can get a truck back or a building back or a manufacturing plant back. In winding down, this question frequently comes up, and it is at front not related to identity theft. But think about where identity theft happens. A lot of times it happens during a credit card transaction. The question always comes up, should I sell my product on my own website? Recognizing that when I sell my product, I'm going to have a credit card transaction. The answer to this question is, For most small businesses, probably not. Why? Because the people that do this professionally are way better at it than you and me. You can buy your online marketing presence. You can buy a setup where someone else sells your product, but you cannot buy protection of proprietary information, protection of identity theft information. It's almost impossible to farm that out to someone. It comes from within, you have to trust. Some parting thoughts, just the last few points to save and savor until the end of your responsibility for the data that you now hold. Make an effort to keep the data to a minimum. Don't hold everything. Go back to people and say, I don't want this information. Make a policy, write it, publish it, get your employees to sign it. Everyone should follow a policy. Not, I'll get to it, do it now. Wait, and you wait and you yield a risk. Know all this is going to happen to you someday, and be prepared for it. Last of the parting thoughts. Identity theft is typically about failed trust. Have to identify who you're going to trust, how and when. You have to look to the data ownership. Who owns this data? Am I taking good care of it for that person or that entity? Evaluate the risk and the reward, not necessarily to you, but to the person who might steal your data. Think about, what are they thinking about my data? Evaluate what the cost in terms of hours and dollars is to you to mitigate the steps, to not necessarily save yourself, but to prevent the damage from being worse. And remember, lastly, trust on both ends of an identity theft issue. Trust is an emotion. It's not a thing. It's not a piece of software. It's not a piece of hardware you go out and spend money on. It's an emotion, and therefore it will take time to create. We have built some appendices, or I have built some appendices. Almost everything you see on this list is a template, or I have a non-disclosure with a company that I helped create that product. I can create an appendix or a template or a model for you to use for an appropriate use policy, for an open the office, close the office, open the network, close the network, or I can help you create other policies. But here's the thing, just like your business plan, you know more about this than I do. I can give you a template, but I can't fill the template in for you, and that's up to you, because only you know your business. That is the last of the pieces of the presentation. What we're going to post here next, if you get a copy of the presentation, or you can email me. I've got my email down here at the bottom. We tried to make the polling issue work, and there was my idiocy or the lack of documentation or something. We couldn't make it work the way we wanted to. So this is the poll. This is all of it. It's just one page. And if you don't get it, email me. I'll be happy to send it to you. But that's there for you. And if you want the slides, it'll be in the slides. Questions and answers. I didn't get any questions up here on my enable chat thing. So I'm assuming you didn't have any questions. If you do have questions, go back there. There's the email. You can always call the office in Fort Pierce. And I'm going to go here. And where is it? I thought there was a place here to offer. No, there was not a place here to do that. The Treasure Coast office is treasurecoast.score.org. You can go there for further answers. And this will be the last of our presentation. I appreciate your time. I hope you got some valuable information. You can email me, and you can talk to the SCORE office. Thank you very much. Goodbye.